I'll start admitting people.
Admit nothing.
Admit all. Admit all. Admit everything. Admit everything. Good morning, Mike. Good morning, Karen. Good morning, Chris. Morning, Sarah. Morning, Philip. Morning, Barry. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining Pension Playpen. Coffee morning. Morning, Paul. If you could mute if you've just joined, that would be great. Just to cut out any background noise, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. Nicola. Morning, morning, Jan. Morning, Simon. Morning, Aaron. Morning, Phil. Thank you very much. Morning, Amy. If you've just joined, if you could mute, please, that'd be great. Thank you very much. Just to let's just see if anybody else is unmuted. Okay, Eugene, can you mute Eugene, or shall I do it? I can do it actually.
Got the power, Steve. The power.
I have the power. There we go. I'm going to mute Eugene. There you go. And yeah, as well, just to cut out any background noise, which is good. If Tom, there we go. Brilliant. Okay. Right. Good morning, everybody. It's now 10:33. Welcome to this week's Pension Playpen Coffee Morning. We are delighted to welcome probably the youngest panel that a pensions event has ever seen. So I'm delighted that we've got Steph Gold, Dan Trainer, and Nicola Whitaker on today to talk about, I think, a very, very interesting subject, which is why do the young hate pensions? They are going to be ably assisted by Tom McPhail, who's wallowing in glory this morning for Pot for Life, but we'll come back to that at the end. We are being recorded, so everybody thumbs up that everybody's happy to be recorded. Andrew, Kerry, yeah, everybody's happy that we're being recorded. And thank you very much indeed. As usual with Pension Playpen, if you want to raise a question or raise a hand to raise a question, please do on an interactive basis. If you want to put comments in the chat, please do as well. Henry, Tom, and I will monitor the chat and bring you in either during or towards the end of the presentation and the discussion. But without any further ado, I think I'll pass on to probably Steph, maybe, if I may. Steph, hand to you first. There is a list of questions on the agenda, which I think would be useful to run through. So I suppose, start the ball rolling, Steph. Why do the young hate pensions? And over to you and the panel.
Thanks, Steve. And yeah, I think it would be really good if we made it as sort of interactive session as possible. So please do ask questions as we go along, and butt in if you want to get the conversation going. Why do they young hate pensions? I suppose maybe, do they hate pensions? Do we actually know? I suppose would be one point of, do we ask young people? And with that in mind, and I have to confess, I'm probably not the youngest person on the panel either, for sure. But I did ask both my kids yesterday about what they think about pensions. One is of a working age and one is at school. And both of them said they didn't really hate it, but what they didn't know about it. They didn't feel that they were, had that level of education that gave them the opportunity even to have an opinion really on whether they hate it or not, which is something that I raised, Steve, on one of the previous playpens, which I think is why I'm here, in terms of, looking at education around pensions and broader financial well-being for kids when they're at school. My eldest daughter said, I learned all about some theorem in maths that I'm never, ever, ever going to use, but I didn't learn about mortgages or income tax or any of those things. So, yeah, I think that's sort of something that is really important and we should be looking for. And Steve, you showed us a book earlier that's just been launched, which I think is going to really help with, things like that, educating children. So, but Nicola, I don't know whether you've got a view on Well, I know you've got a view.
Thanks, Steph. So yes,
can I just jump in? You said jump in, Steph. So if I may, I will jump in. I think your question is absolutely great. Your question to the question is what do we know if they don't? And I wrote on this subject. This is a real pet subject of mine. I wrote on this subject about 5 years ago after the FT did some research showing that they absolutely do hate pensions. And I think the article was entitled something like, why do the young want to go on holiday rather than put money in a pension? So I think let's find some more evidence by all means. But, I think it is absolutely the case. But to your point, I've got 3 adult children now in professional jobs. The oldest is a surgeon in the army. He's got a contribution-free pension, and they love him to bits. And they've been completely fully educated financially by their boring old dad. But I think for most people in pensions, I think we can probably take it as read that they're not the keenest in the world. Hope that's okay.
Thanks, Paul. Nicola, you're about to speak, and go on. What are your thoughts on that, and what are your thoughts on what Paul just said?
Is that actually, Paul? Absolutely, really good points, and also just to kind of come back on the, what other evidence do we have? And I spoke about this on the last playpen, which is again why I think I'm here, as Steph is as well. Is talking about the social media platforms and the dim view that we see upon influencers going online, and they're pushing things like Bitcoin and lifetime ISAs instead of pensions, and saying pensions are a scam. And when am I ever going to see my pension? Because the pension age is going up and up and up for sort of millennials and Gen Zs. So it's absolutely imperative that we kind of push back as an industry, I think, on things like social media platforms, and not just sending out leaflets. And books are great for kids, but the age group, the young savers who are working age, are not seeing that. Their influencers are saying, don't save into a pension, there's no point. And actually that is where they're getting their information from, and it's not always correct. So we need to, as an industry, as Steph rightly said, educate, but also engage in the right way, on the right platforms.
Thanks, Nicola. So Philip, we'll come to you in a second. Dan, what are your thoughts?
I do wonder if I might slightly challenge some of that, in the sense that I don't know, as a self-confessed young person, I'm in my late 20s, so I'm going to firmly put myself in there, and I work in pensions, so I certainly can't hate it. But I do wonder if apathy towards pensions by 21 to 35-year-olds, is that a new thing? Have previous generations, have baby boomers, have Gen X, age 21 to 35, were they engaged in pensions? I think probably not. But they were looked after, because their DB pensions from their employer that they stayed with for 30 years, their hand was put out at retirement age, and they were sorted with a 2/3 final salary pension. So I'm necessarily not sure it's a new issue that the younger generation aren't engaged, but I think the problem we have is that it's the first generation that will be negatively impacted by their apathy, and therefore might be something we have to fix. But I think on the way it's reframed, I think savings is the way that we should go, because that's essentially what it is. And I've come across those TikToks that say you'd be better investing your money. But what is a pension if it's not an investment? That's exactly what it is. So I think that framing of I think someone's online.
Whoever's answering that call, could they go on mute, please?
That was Phil.
Yeah.
We can have a go at him later.
Yeah,
Go on,
I
Dan.
think that's going to be my point. I think if, along with the education point, I think framing pensions as savings is going to be absolutely key to getting people involved. And I think with it, we'll probably move on to that, the different products that can be offered and the sort of hybrid between that savings and traditional pension model. But savings, not pensions. That's I think going to be my opening gambit.
Okay, thanks for that, Dan. So we've had influencers and we've had savings, not pensions. And to your whoever's someone, thank you. I'm old enough that I got auto-enrolled into a workplace pension, a final salary scheme, without even realizing it. And it was only a few months down the line that someone explained to me that I was now a member of a final salary pension scheme. And in due course, I was delighted that this turned out to be the case, though sadly not for my entire working career, which would be just great. But you know, there was a lot to recommend that at the time. So I agree with you, Dan. I think, you know, this 20-somethings are not typically thinking first and foremost about pensions. I'm just going to quote some DWP research before we move to Philip and then Andrew. Some really good attitudinal research from the DWP a year or so ago. Interviews found that participants' attitudes towards their pensions were characterized by detachment, complacency, and fear. That might resonate with some people on this call. We also found that young people were relatively pessimistic about their retirements. Nearly 90% stated they were either not at all confident, a little confident, or moderately confident they were doing enough for retirement. And they generally expect to retire later than they actually want to retire. They also said they want information, knowledge on closer milestones, such as taking out a mortgage, which all kind of makes sense if you're 20-something. So again, everything you say there, Dan, I think resonates there. Philip, yeah, please. What did you want to say? Has he gone off to answer a phone call?
He's still on the phone call. I think you should go to Andrew.
Okay, Andrew, yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, hi. I completely agree with the labelling of pensions as savings. There was an article, I think, in the Times a couple of weeks ago, which made exactly this point, that pensions is something for old people, whereas savings is something for everybody. From the stats we see from our admin report on DC, there's sort of the penny drops literally around about the mid-30s when people really start upping their contributions. And I think it's probably just a fact that that's when people's salaries allow them to be able to put a bit more aside. And the education that people like Rob Gardner have done in the past about pointing out that for the price of a cappuccino a day, that there can be significant outcomes when you get to your 60s. But of course, for young people who don't have much disposable income, it's tough to put away for something that you might not need for another 40 years. But it really is about education, and I think we've got to be able to engage with, as a trustee of a DC scheme. Engagement is everything, and trying to find ways that we can get them on their phones to look at how their savings are doing, get them interested, find out how their investments are doing, because they are investments. It's not a pension, it's an investment, and get them excited about it. I think is the only way we're going to progress this. But I wonder whether, with younger people working from home a bit more and saving money on having to buy their lunch out at Pret a Manger and saving on travel, whether this is now the time for us to start telling them, any money you've got spare, put it into your pension, and it's tax-free. And again, education, tax-free. It gets matched by the company. You're gonna be so grateful. This is what I tell my kids. You're going to be so grateful for this advice when you're my age. But it's a long haul, I know, but there are ways to get people more engaged.
So we know that, particularly, I mean, it's slightly different for the self-employed, and maybe we'll come on to them, but for an employee, literally every pound you put in gets doubled, right? There is no, and then it's in a tax-exempt fund and it's growing tax-free. I mean, there is no better deal available, certainly as a mass market proposition, combination of the tax relief and your employer's contributions. So what is it that's not resonating? Is it just, as Dan said, that they're just more interested in nearer term stuff, that people are just like, pensions are too abstract, too far down the line, and more interested in nearer stuff? Is it that they are more interested in what the social influencers have, as Nicola sort of touched on? Does the answer lie in saying these are savings and we'll double, and look, it's just a good idea, so join up? So is it a communication thing? Or do we just shove them in and not worry about the fact they hate pensions? They'll come around in the long term. As long as they're in a pension, it'll be fine. Do we just let auto enrollment do its magic? Who wants to come in on all of that?
So many questions, Tom. I think the fundamental thing is this not being able to access this money that they've, put aside, coupled with the fact that they want to buy a property, and things. And as you say, people have got a limited finance pool, and they need to prioritize. And I think that thinking, if I'm 30, I need to be saving into my pension that I probably can't access for 35, 40 years potentially, versus I really want to get on the housing market so that I don't have to keep paying astronomical rent. You can understand why people are not as engaged with pensions. So maybe it's the whole structure of saving as a whole, and being able to access money for things like buying a property, and rather than being able to just put stuff in a pension that I can't access, as I say, for 30, 40, 50 years, who knows.
Is the lifetime ISA the solution then?
Well, I actually looked at that, didn't I, Steph? We was talking about lifetime ISAs this morning, and the government bump you up 25%. So yes, it is something that's talked about quite a bit on the socials at the moment, about the lifetime ISAs being preferable to putting in a DC contribution of, say, 3% or whatever.
But finding a way for employers to be able to support that, so that people aren't missing out on that employer contribution.
Yeah, I think there's also
okay, go on.
Sorry.
Go on, Dan.
No, I think the flexibility point is also key. We were talking earlier about the fact that in years gone by, you worked solidly for 30, 40 years, and then there was a line in the sand. There was one day that you retired. And I think perhaps for many people of my generation, that's probably not the way our lives will look. There's probably not going to be one date where we stop working 5 days a week and we are fully retired. It's going to be something more gradual. There's going to be elements of consultancy. There's going to be different types of part-time working, casual hour contracts, whatever that might look like. And so I think that needs a pension to reflect that, or pension products to reflect that. Now, I was at a talk last week with the Association of Pension Lawyers, very, very hot ticket, as you can imagine, and they were discussing the future of dashboards. And I think in the short term, dashboards is about people seeing where their money is and seeing what it's doing. But looking to the future, it's all about integration. That's the plan. Open banking, the idea that you can see your savings account, your current account, your credit cards, your mortgage, and also the pensions that you have there. And with that, I think they're hoping that come these other opportunities. And I think someone had discussed sidecar savings, the idea that for a period, any savings that you and your employer contribute is split between a rainy day fund, a mortgage fund, whatever it might be, and your pension. And then at a certain threshold, it flips one to more to the other, depending on what that might be. And I think that element of flexibility is going to be absolutely key, because like we're saying, locking that money away age 25 when you're not going to see it for 40 years is a massive disincentive, despite the tax benefits, but massive disincentive when you can't afford to buy a house.
So I'm hoping Philip's back online, but just Nicola and Steph are both nodding away there. So before I come to Philip, so I just want to get, would you guys agree that it's just about making things a little more adaptive and flexible, and more to cater better for the ebb and flow of people's lives of today?
Yeah, because everything about now, this generation, is flexible. So I can order myself a coffee now and it'll be delivered to my door in 5 minutes, and I can track it, and I can order whatever I want online, and I get things at the drop of a hat. I want the same with pensions. They want it to be, I want that £1,500 that I've just saved up in my pension because I want to go buy a car or whatever that might be. So the way that we get things, everything is so much more easily accessible now, whether that be a pension, a bank account. I can go on my online banking, I can transfer money to you in 10 seconds. That's what they want for pensions, and it's a little bit behind.
We should rebrand these as savings plans for people with short attention spans.
But that is
The goldfish.
unfortunately where we're at, I think.
I think the education
go on,
piece is
Steph.
really important there, though, because, you know, we all saw what happened at the beginning of COVID, for example. You know, investment markets tumbled, and if you've got all that information readily available, but you don't have the knowledge that investment markets go up and down, and it's a long-term investment for pensions and all of that good stuff. And you look at, you know, today I've got 25 grand in my pot, tomorrow I've got 22 grand in my pot. I panic because I don't know, you know, where's all my money gone. So I think having it more easily accessible for people to understand, and it become a bit more part of conversation and general day-to-day, you know, this different saving for today, tomorrow, one day, in effect. The importance of education really goes up there as well, because I need to know what it all means, and that, you know, if the stock market has tumbled, then, you know, there is actually some positives there because I'm buying at cheaper prices, and that. So I think that you can't just go, oh yeah, we'll give people all of that access, but still not give people the education that they need, that we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah, because people don't always respond in the ways that are optimal for their own well-being.
No.
Look, talking of education, Philip, you know, you.
Sorry, thank you, and apologies, that was me who ended up getting the call. I was going to just type in the comments, but I felt really bursting to just chip in on this, because I've had the experience of going into schools to talk about child trust funds, which are maturing at the moment. I think they were actually a brilliant policy, and it is a great shame that that they did actually end. The reason they were a brilliant policy is because it was a contribution to a young person in terms of savings, and it was locked for 18 years. So immediately, somebody maturing at 18 can see the growth of 18 years. So it really got them to understand about long-term investment and savings. I could spend a half an hour talking about all the stories that come out of that, but it is going back to schools, and it is back to basic financial education. And Steph mentioned it, is that I was talking to teachers, they were so grateful about going in and explaining trust funds and investments to these children, that they said, look, it would be brilliant if they could just get basic education in mortgages and debt, which is basically, it's mathematics. So why they can't actually attach that sort of stuff to existing syllabus and make things very practical, I don't know why. So that would be, that's my bit of experience, just to chip in here. There is so much rich stuff came out of the child trust funds, and if we can actually just bring some education into the syllabus, practical education, that would be actually brilliant.
So people, no, thanks, Philip. People talk about, I mean, financial education in schools is one that just comes around and around and hasn't delivered an outcome that we're all looking for here. So I'd really be interested to hear if anyone's got any comments on how that could be made to work more effectively and why it hasn't delivered. Why doesn't it happen? Is it about credit space on the curriculum? Whatever. I'd love to hear comments on that. In the meantime, Martin, you've been sitting there waiting patiently.
Hi, thanks very much. And this is the first one I've joined. I think, and there's been good comments around investing. I think the accessibility point is interesting, but it's not about accessibility. But there's a clear young people investing in crypto and Bitcoin. There's a clear understanding or want to do investing, and especially retail investing. And actually, it's just about the misunderstanding of what pensions look like. And it does go back to the education point. I think there's also around things that have been looked at in terms of how you might access part of your pension pot to have a house deposit. I think we forget actually these days. My mom, when she bought her first flat on her first staff nurse job, I am years into my career now and not doing that, and I think that's been forgotten, is that the additional cost, the on affordability of housing, but also, you know, if you're the 9% you pay on your student loan, for example, if you're a graduate, those are additional costs that you just see as deductions out of your payslip, and so you just see your pension deduction as another thing that is totally accessible. You get a headline every year that says state pension age is going up by another 2 years. What does that? So why are you doing this thing that you're not going to contribute to, that you're going to not see until 70, essentially, at least 70? I don't expect to see anything until I'm 70, and so it becomes another premise that is so foreign and far away, and things such as pension dashboards will help bring us some of those near, in terms of seeing that aspect. But at the same time, when you receive an annual student loan statement that says you still owe 90 grand, you aren't going to connect with the pension statement in the same way as well, and think, oh, that's money that's going to happen one day. And we need to really understand that. I think Dan's point, you know, any generation, anyone under 35, that engagement, but I think just this generation particularly, and still as part of that under 35s, there were so many more additional costs and additional things that we see our own parents that were able to afford at a much lower earning threshold and much younger in life, that we just aren't there. This is just this to some people just feels like another 5 or 8 or whatever % coming out each month, that yes, it's being doubled in the background, but you don't engage with that. And so it's how you start to people, because people are investing, because people are doing Bitcoin and crypto and some of that quite heavy risky stuff. But actually, how do you and even people are, you know, especially if there was a survey done by Phoenix, I think it was, or LNG, on actually especially young ethnic minority people more likely to invest and buy and try to clump together to buy a home than pensions. And actually how is that fine or well and good, but actually again, it's that investing for the long term. That concept is well understood in terms of what you're investing in. It's how we make pensions part of that conversation, essentially.
There was a lot there. Thanks for that, Martin. I guess, you know, everything's got shifted to the right, hasn't it? So people reach adulthood typically older than they used to, and as you say, when they get there, they're carrying a whole load of debt that was certainly much more substantial and much more widespread than was the case 20 or 30 years ago. And yes, I can see that the housing market has become less obtainable. I mean, it's the second time housing's already been mentioned on this call, and I think that's interesting, that part of the solution to our problems appears to lie entirely out with the kind of remit of this forum, that, you know, if we could just solve the housing crisis, then maybe pensions would get fixed as well. I think that's probably I think it is a contributory factor, but life is probably a lot more complicated than that. And that to me was what was clever about the Lifetime ISA, was that it was trying to offer that flexibility and, you know, allow you to ride both horses at once, and, you know, flex your savings in an effective way. I think if they hadn't buggered up the Brexit referendum, we probably would have seen more on that. But it was 2016 and strange things happened. So, Michael, would you like to come in at this point? Preferably while not on mute.
Yes, I know.
Never grows old, does it?
Can you? No, not at all. I actually saw a T-shirt the other day that says "You're on mute," and I'm just really tempted to buy it. I think that I get the education piece, and you're absolutely right. Not enough is taught in schools, and sort of one of the weird things is, but my son that goes to a sort of very small specialist school because of his wonderful ADHD, but they spend more time talking about stuff like debit cards and savings and mortgages than kids in either mainstream or even sort of certain private schools that I've heard of, which, you know, surprises me. That is, as you say, why is the curriculum so crowded? But that's a conversation for another day. The point here, I think, is around. It's great if we can look at long-term, short-term savings. I think that is absolutely the way to go. But how can we do that when short-term savings are so tax disincentivized, if that is even a word? If you think about it, even, you know, you only need to earn £1,000 interest now. Okay, I know that's 50 grand in a savings account, which is a lot of money. But straight away, if you're, you know, willing enough to save from your post-tax earnings that have already been taxed, you could reach a point where the interest is being taxed. So you're being taxed yet again. Even your ISA is still, restricted and is still coming out of post-tax earnings. At the moment, your pension is the only savings vehicle that I'm aware of, and happy to stand corrected, that you can save into from pre-tax earnings. Now, obviously, Mr. Jeremy and his colleagues don't want to give up a penny of the tax that they can take from us. But should we be lobbying those in power that you're not going to get people to save unless you stop taxing the hell out of it?
You don't sound like a fan of big government, Michael.
I wouldn't call myself a sort of true right of centre libertarian, but it just always sort of surprises me that every time they come up with something, oh yeah, save here, save there, they give with one hand and sort of suddenly take with another.
Okay, let's put that
to it's just a thought to throw out there.
All right, let's put that to the young people on the call then. Is it about the tax?
Nicola, that's one for you.
Yeah.
Or Dan.
I don't mind. I actually don't agree with you, Michael, but it's about instant gratification now, and they won't be thinking about tax. And as Steph said, they don't know what that is for. However, I think it's important it's a perception thing now. It's not even about, is a pension any good for me? Is that savings product okay? And yeah, Dan's right, we should have lots of different products with lots of flexibility, because that is the general consensus. But as an industry, and people on this panel who and across this call who work in the pensions industry, we should be looking at changing the perception of that generation, not trying to change what product they use. Or we should be going on these platforms and going, you know what, pensions are fantastic and these are all the benefits, because at the minute the perception is all the negatives about a pension. There's negatives and positives for all products. You could sit there and say that Lifetime ISA's got negatives, talk about that, but it's perception, and I think we need to work together to change that.
What did you make of the Pay Your Pension Some Attention campaign? A Big Zoo or Timmy Mallet this year, wasn't it?
I think using Timmy Mallet, it was the wrong person. That's just my opinion.
Who is Timmy Mallet?
Exactly, Dan. Exactly, Dan.
My generation.
My point exactly. It was aimed at the wrong generation, I think.
Nicola, I totally sort of take your point, and that my tax sort of issue was a sort of more of a side rant than the sort of overall perception. And the instant gratification thing is never going to go away whilst we still have interest-free credit. So do we need to sort of destroy Klarna as well?
No.
Okay, so we've got to reshape the housing market and
don't ever say that again.
There was panic on Nicola's face just then.
But it comes back down to the point. There's no incentive to, in the old days of save up to buy something, you don't need to save up to buy something, because Klarna will let you spread it over 3 payments, interest free, and as long as you make the payments, it's there. I get a letter a month from my credit card company. All my credit cards offer me a 0% transfer, even in this sort of high-ish interest realm that we're in. Every month, a piece of junk mail comes through saying transfer for 0%.
And is that short-term cash flow expenditure, buy things now, short-term credit? Is that where people's focus of attention is? Is it that pensions are just vying with stuff that is inherently far more interesting and far more immediate, and we should? So I guess I'm taking your point, Michael, and the kind of thing, Nicola's reaction to that is like, okay, should we just not try and sell pensions? Should we just make pension saving compulsory again and have done with it, right? Let's just go back to compulsory pensions. We can stick it in a national investment fund, like Norwegian state investment fund kind of style, and just force people to save.
I totally back the education point is massively important, and incentivizing young people to save. But I think there is also, following that point, there might be a second panicked realization when you realize just how much you need in your DC pot to pay for an annuity. This is focused on the current products and operations that are in place right now, that you need to purchase an annuity that will give you a meaningful income in retirement. And so I think there is a recognition within the industry, perhaps not in a wider societal context, that the contribution levels that you need in a DC context are up here, but what people can actually afford is much, much lower than that. And so I think positive reinforcement is absolutely key, but is there an element of shocking people into doing this? Is there an element of when you turn 60, 65, more likely 70 for people of my age, there's not going to be a 2/3 final salary pension there. You generations before haven't had to think about it, and for the most, that is what's happened at retirement. But on the basis that that's not going to happen now, there's an element of negative reinforcement of putting a slight, this is actually something you need to think about. Does that help? I'm not saying, that's probably more of an open question for the group as opposed to something that I would campaign and believe on, but I do think that relative low figure of DC contributions that go in compared to what is needed to purchase an annuity that's meaningful and for the rest of your life is something that we're not really thinking about.
I think another issue, which comes back to that, the property piece, is are people thinking now, if I can't buy a house or a property and I carry on renting, how am I going to afford to pay my rent when I've stopped working?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and it's a really important complication in the whole auto-enrollment juggernaut that is not easily solved from a policy point of view. I see Philip's still got his hand up. I don't know whether that means he wanted to come in again or he's just gone off to take another phone call. And oh, there we go. Paul, did you want to come back in again?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. What a great topic. Honestly, what a really great topic. I think Dan has hit the nail on the head here, and it goes back to this FT article which talked about, had pictures of people going on holiday to Spain rather than joining the pension. And the quotes they got, I'm afraid it's the industry's doing this problem, and it's conservatism. All right, I don't mean political conservatism, I mean number conservatism. So what we're doing as an industry is we're telling a 25-year-old that in 40 years time they're going to have to buy an inflation-linked annuity and get a 2.5–3% yield. And guess what? If they want a 25, let's make the numbers easy. If they want a 30 grand a year pension on top of their state pension, which is quite juicy now, they're going to need £1 million fund. And guess what? They're going to need to put £15,000 a year into their pension to get their £1 million fund. It's naivety in the extreme on the part of the pensions industry. Let's just stop quoting conservative growth rates. Let's stop putting people in conservative default funds, and stop telling people they're going to have to buy a bloody, excuse me, passionate about this, have to buy a ruddy inflation-linked income in retirement that nobody buys, right? We're telling people they've got to have a Rolls Royce. Nobody can afford a Rolls Royce. They buy a Mondeo. Okay, I'm showing my age now. They buy a Focus. Or my missus is now looking at a Hyundai i20. Is that modern enough? You know, but look, this is ridiculous. Telling people you've got to get £1 million pension fund. It's to Dan's point. It's up there, right? And people can afford it. So let's look at what people can generate with what they can afford. And it's not bad, is it? When you look at the the Pensions Lifetime Association, you know, numbers, you can get to a reasonable place with a reasonable contribution. Let's just stop all the silly conservativeness and, you know, get real. I think the young uns would appreciate it if the old farts got real, frankly.
I do wish you wouldn't sit on the fence like that, Paul. That's really...
and don't knock the Mondeo either. It was a classic.
Eugen.
Yeah, I don't think that we need to be aggressive with assumptions. because people use this for planning, and many people have ended up with a lot less than what they were offered. Remember the endowments, which they were done on very aggressive assumptions, and in the end ended up in paying compensation. So I think the assumptions are right, and the assumptions to buy an annuity is right. The annuity is not the Rolls Royce, it's the Mondeo. The drawdown is the Rolls Royce in this case, and it's only for people who can afford it and have funds more than £500,000 or something. That's my view of it.
Thank you.
So is the issue then that people have the expectations have been set at the wrong level?
Right, but the psychologists tell us a significant determinant of people's happiness is whether reality matches their expectations, right? So, okay, their expectations are set by people like Henry, who've done well out of life, and who have vast pensions, and this is, they've seen the baby boomers ride the escalator up. So my question to you guys is, to what extent do the youth of today, you Gen Zs or you millennials or whatever you are, recognize that the reality is you're riding the reverse baby boom escalator back down again, and the reality waiting for you is going to be a lot less enjoyable than what Henry gets to enjoy? And faced with that prospect, you go, well, to hell with that then.
You're absolutely right, Tom. There was a video quite interestingly posted yesterday on a particular platform, and the lady had received her pension statement, and she'd shown how much she'd had in her pot, what she'd contributed and what she'd get on a monthly basis if she were to take an income. And it was about £860 a month. And she said, well, my rent's £1,000 a month, so how's that going to stretch? So in her head, she was like, even if I did another, I think she said she was 37, the lady she might be 38. And she said, well, if I'm supposed to be retiring 20 years, and if that goes up to 1,000, my rent would have increased again by the time I retire. So what's the point? She said, I might as well just, and also a lot of people didn't know or don't know, who don't work in the pensions world, is that when you do go to take your retirement, you get 25% taken off you. You get your tax-free cash, and then you get the rest is taxed. So again, we're pushing, or some companies are pushing it's tax-free. Yeah, it is, but it's not, because eventually you will get taxed on it. So I think we just need to be careful with messaging, and again, I'm going to keep saying it, and I'm going to bore you throughout this call. The perception needs to change. Pensions isn't boring. Pensions are great, but we aren't telling people how great they are and what the options are, and education, things like, I've spoken to friends of mine. They don't know what pension lifestyling is in a DC pension scheme. They don't understand what an aggressive fund is, what moderate funds are. Some people don't even know that there's, different funds and self-select funds that you can go into with certain providers. So you can't, I know that because I work in pensions, but if I was a hairdresser, like I have been previously, I wouldn't have a clue what all that was. So there's education, there's perceptions, there's, and moving on to sort of some of the questions we were talking about on the agenda, sort of talking about, societal factors. Someone mentioned, inflation, cost of living crisis. That's another factor right now that we're not dealing with, and saying, well, why are people opting out? Well, they can't actually afford a pension. So there's lots of factors here that, we could do some short-term bits and pieces as an industry, just starting to change perceptions and get people thinking about it in a different way. Yeah.
So we can't easily solve people's cost of living crisis or the housing sector. So there are, again, issues beyond our capacity to address. Obviously, we can get Henry onto TikTok as a social media influencer. Jim, what did you want to say?
Thanks, Tom. So from our side, it's my kids are a bit younger, so they're not thinking, but they're 11 and 8. And I did get them to make a McLeod friendship bracelet for us for pensions awareness. But there's a real demand out there for people to find out about pensions. So I've done webinars across the council before for people, and we get 200-300 people coming on, and a lot of the people are in their 20s and 30s, and they're wanting to find out about what does this mean. But it's right, when they look at what they mostly see is the deduction of their pay, and they're like, they just assume there's going to be something there at the end of it. And when you actually lay it out for them what it is, what they're going to get, it's a very valuable benefit. And I think some of that comes back to the point you say about society, that in the 60s and 70s, you know, we had the post-war settlement, people could expect a decent retirement, and there was a collective solution. Now it's all been moved individually, and people just don't have that sort of safety net that they had. And it is going to be harder for people. That people are going to be struggling to pay their rent in retirement, and pensions is only so far. We are, as a society, more unequal, and people are more on their own resources than they are before, and that's kind of the reality that we're in. So that's my.
All right, thanks for that dose of optimism.
Yeah, but here in the public sector,
Eugen.
we still have our career-related pensions.
Am I pronouncing that right? Is it Eugen? Eugen? I'm sorry, it's not a name I've come across
Eugen
before.
is fine. To Nicola, because she said 800 and something per month is the rent. For that statement is inflation adjusted. So that lady, if she doesn't buy a house, will have 825 quid to pay the rent when retired, on top of her state pension, and so it's very valuable.
You're
825 pounds per month is a very valuable amount that will probably help her to live in retirement. So it's nothing to say no, it's not, or to complain about it. So,
Agreed. But she doesn't know that, and that was my point, is that, you know, she's created this video going, how am I going to afford that? But because you know, and I know that that's the case, but she didn't know that. And that's what I'm saying about perception, is they don't know what we're talking about now. They don't know, I'm not saying everybody, because there are lots of people who do educate themselves on, you know, pensions, finance, investments, and, you know, I'm not generalizing, but that particular woman who posted that wasn't aware of that fact, and that's the key messaging that we need to get across.
Yeah, it's clear that we need more education, but we should not say that. And it also depends on the employers. We got very lucky here on Bournemouth. We got an employer who pays 20-25% in total pensions, JP Morgan. So like in the old days with DB, so it really depends on what the employer is willing to offer and what the union or what the employees manage to negotiate. So it should not be only 8%. And I'm aware of many other employers that they pay a lot more than that. So I don't know, the system still works, in my opinion, and we just need more education.
Thank you. Henry.
Hi. Yeah, I'm supposed to standing in lieu of Gareth Morgan, who will say that for an awful lot of people, saving small amounts into a workplace pension may not be a good idea, especially if they have limited state pension entitlements. The pension effectively can bar them from getting pension credit. People need to understand these things when they make decisions about whether or not to be saving in workplace pensions. And they appreciate people going out of their way to discuss them with them, whether that be through maps or whether it be through the guidance we give. We ought to be telling people that there are different ways to skin a cat, and the workplace pension isn't always the right one. I know this is controversial and the DWP don't like me saying it, but the reality is that workplace pensions aren't right for everybody, and telling people that there are alternatives is actually more likely for them to be engaged with what they do than simply trying to shoehorn them into products which frankly don't do them much good. So it's a Gareth Morgan statement, which I thoroughly agree with.
I think that builds on the education point as well, about educating young people about what pensions are and what they can offer is one thing, but also moving forward, we in the not too distant future will have an entire generation of pension savers who have never had to make a decision about their pensions at all. And I noticed in the chat that Paul said 90% of people don't feel confident to do anything with their pensions. And so apathy can work, and you can force people into automatic enrolment, into a default that's very well managed, and a lot of experts in the industry are inputting into what that might do. But then if you've not made a decision until you reach that decumulation point, panic sets in. And so I think that education point has to also extend beyond young people and saving. It must. I don't know whether the answer is some form of decision making at an earlier point in the accumulation process, or whether education also must be important at that point that you go to retire, and that making those decisions. Like, I think the sort of default that everyone seems to be working towards, or we're told we're working towards, is the annuity. But as we've discussed, that option's not right for everyone, and that option might not bring the best lifestyle for that person in retirement. And so I think that the education point has to also go further. There's almost that lost generation in the middle that are saving well by force almost, but will have a slight panic when the paperwork arrives, which will undoubtedly be several reams of paper thick, and have to make a decision about what to do.
Are there other ways we can bridge that communications gap and that engagement gap? And, what are we not doing that we should be doing? Is it back to Nicola's point around sort of influencers and just recrafting the messaging for ways that will actually engage with 20-somethings of today? Where do we go from here?
I may have me again, but I have a slight bugbear on, not to be the lawyer in the room, but the disclosure regulations that discuss the ways in which, or limit the ways in which people must be communicated with about their pension, are not drafted for the 21st century, and they're most certainly not drafted with Gen Z or millennials in mind. I think we can learn a lot from the wider financial services sector, particularly around investments, apps that encourage, or platforms that encourage, small amounts of investment. The gamification of the way they do things is hugely engaging to a younger generation. But we have clients who are trying to embark on similar pension products that are absolutely hamstrung by the disclosure regulations. And so I think the education piece is massively important. I think that'll all be our takeaway from today. But as a short-term way in encouraging innovation in the way that with pensions products that are available, that will hopefully lead to greater engagement for a younger generation, is an amendment to those disclosure regulations. The idea that 2 pieces of paper must be sent to a member about certain changes to the way their pensions are administered, or whatever it might be, is just not fit for the way that people consume their information below the ages of 45, if not older. So I'll sit quiet on that one, because I could stand in my soapbox on that point all day. But
I'm just going to press you on that a little bit more, Dan, because I remember the FCA publishing a discussion paper in maybe 2017 around digital communication, and at the time it felt like they were very open-minded to the idea of communicate in pictures, do novel and inventive stuff. And we are a number of years down the line. I think it was 2017, so that puts us 6 years down the line from there. And I see little evidence of that actually happening. And there's a balance. So should the industry be pushing back on the FCA and saying, look, you're part of the problem here?
I think there's a balance to be struck, because we are talking about decisions that will affect the rest of people's lives, and so they cannot be taken lightly. There is perhaps an element of, should you be able to make that decision on the bus on the way to Tesco for your shopping, or should it require you to have that greater degree of thought, which arguably the current process encourages, the length of time between decisions being offered and decisions being made. But I think so. I think that pushback is essential. I think particularly from a younger generation that has similar levels of apathy that have perhaps always existed, but people just do not consume their information in the way that we are expected to communicate with them in a pensions context. And I think that's going to be absolutely key to getting people engaged in their pensions at a younger age, at a more meaningful age. £20 in your 20s is more valuable in a pension pot than when you put the £20 in your 40s, right?
And I think Simon's just raised an interesting point about, actually we've focused this on younger people, but we need to engage people right the way through their working career with their savings for when they stop working, and it's not just around, you've got to get the younger people engaged and then it becomes easier, but we have to keep people right the way through engaged, because you could end up in a situation where, fine, the younger people have all done something like auto enrollment, they think that's that box ticked now, they don't need to worry about it for 20 or 30 years, whereas the importance of keeping people engaged to make the right decisions that suit their circumstances at the time is also very important.
Henry, you still got your hand up. Did you want to come in, or should we let Simon sort of open up his microphone?
Let Simon go. I'm sorry, I didn't take my hand down.
I actually wanted to build on your point, Henry, as it happens. We're guilty of disengaging pensions from life. There is data there that tells us, for example, that if you buy a house rather than rent one, your disposable earnings go up by 15% because the mortgage is 15%. And so surely it makes more sense to engage with somebody about the things that mattered to them earlier, like buying a house, like building up some substance for themselves, like the fact that they accrue liabilities like no tomorrow, such as kids and families and things like that, and then address pensions when the time's right for them. If by buying a house you build up something of substance that gets you through life, and you've got 15% more money in your pocket, so you can afford to do something like pensions, that actually attaches it to somebody's life. We're making it about pensions and not about life. And by doing that, we're automatically going to disengage people. Why would somebody at 25 want to get into a conversation with me about pensions or annuities or products, right? It's, I'm not the best at talking to people anyway, but that's one certain way of making sure that they won't talk to me. I ain't going to get invited to any parties for that, am I? We talk about educating other people instead of educating ourselves. If we know they're not talking to us and they're not engaging to us, and there's no evidence that they ever have, right, then maybe it's us that needs to learn, right? And I love the comment from Nicola about open banking and making it relevant to everyday life, because you're not going to worry about money in 40 years' time or 20 years' time if you haven't got any today.
You reach a point.
Worry about that first.
Simon, you do reach a point in life. I can tell you when your contemporaries do start asking you about pensions when you're at parties, but you probably got to get into your 50s before that.
Yeah, that's the bit. Yeah, it happens to me now, but I'm coming up 55.
Okay,
today's playpen is around why do the young. I don't know if they hate pensions. I don't think they care enough about it to even hate it. And for that was my point. If we don't make it relevant to them in their lives, they'll never care in that sort of sense. And we've got to find a way of doing that. So like I say, I wanted to build on Henry's point because I think it did go appreciated with a thumbs up in the chat, but I actually think it was a stronger point than it was given credit for. If we make it about pensions, we'll never engage with anybody.
Very good. Look, I'm conscious we're at 11:29 and Steve's waving a financial education book at his camera, which we should acknowledge in passing. Loose Change by Sonia Rack that's recently come out. I've not read it, but I'm told it's a cracking read. So specifically designed to educate young people about money and saving. Should I, at this point, to wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Tom and the panel, Steph, Dan and Nicola, absolutely fantastic. I think it's a really important subject. I think we just touched the iceberg today. I mean, I think there's definitely round two at some point in the future. We've definitely said a lot, and we really enjoyed the input from, especially from Nicola, Steph and Dan, in terms of what are the younger people thinking. There's a lot to do. Education's been said a lot. Yes, I did wave the book, Sonia's book, Designed for Kids. Pension funds or sponsors maybe should sponsor this book and put it into local schools, for example. But good for Sonia, really great book. But education is really, really important. The topics are huge. I mean, Nicola was talking earlier about TikTok. Yes, TikTok, pension industry needs to embrace TikTok. We need to embrace Instagram. We need to embrace YouTube. Where do the kids want this instant news and instant, stuff? We need to change the way we're doing business. So I really appreciate everybody's input, everybody's questions. Fantastic session. So big clap of hands to Dan, Steph, and Nicola for their input, and Tom for hosting it. So thank you very much indeed. That's really good. The video of today will be up later on this afternoon on Pension Playpen website. We next week have Victor Hagani, who is from the London School of Economics and now at Elm. So he's going to be talking about statistics and economics and the missing billionaires. Apparently there should be lots of billionaires out there who are missing, so we'll find out what he has to talk about. But I genuinely think, especially for Nicholas, Steph and Dan, I think there's a round two here. We need to engage much more as an industry with the young people, and government needs to listen. I know there's going to be a change in government potentially, but government needs to listen, and we need to think about how that could be done better. And work with young people. The thing that comes out of this is, I think the industry doesn't really know what young people want or how young people tick. So let's do a lot of research. Let's not research 50 people. Why aren't the government researching thousands of kids? And really getting a good sense of what they want, what they value, what they want to achieve going forward. I think it's tip of the iceberg today, but absolutely brilliant, and a fantastic input from all. So thank you very much indeed. Well, the other thing, of course, is we want to pray for peace in the East, and we also want to pray for peace in the Middle East. And let's hope that that sorts itself out, definitely, very soon. So I wish everybody a fantastic rest of the day and rest of the week, and we hope to see you all on Pension Playpen next Tuesday. If you're a member, thank you very much. Please spread the word. If you're not a member, please join, and we'd love to have you on board the Pension Playpen fraternity and team. So absolutely brilliant, and thanks everyone for your attendance today. So enjoy the rest of your week, and be safe.
Thanks.
See you later, everyone.
Thanks
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.